I remember looking out that window, and I do not remember a pole being right in front of it. Besides, why would they build a pole so close to the house, blocking the view of the window like that? I observed that weird structure, looking up, then down, until I realized what I was looking at was not a pole at all. A pole does not have two legs, two arms, and a head. It's not like rods coming out of it, so perfectly thin and motioned, as if each inch of it was industrial. Perhaps an arm.
Are you ready to go, driver?
Appeared to be its head. Just the reason I hadn't seen it move was because it seemed to be staring into Andy's window. This tall, unnaturally shaped, and unnaturally thin creature was looking into the glass, and I was standing there outside with it, now too afraid to breathe or move. This thing was so perfectly still that I was still able to try to convince myself that it was some natural or man-made object, and that the dark of the night was making it look like something it wasn't. But the horror of the situation was certain. A coyote call came echoing from the woods behind me, rather in front of the tent. And that pole or rod-like creature twisted around and faced the woods. I yanked my head away from the corner of the tent and set it as quickly as I could, dreading the fact that my small movements had made the tent material ruffle up a bit. I prayed that it hadn't hurt me. This two-story tall thing. My inner voice spoke in my head, repeating incomplete sentences, making excuses for my just a nightmare, just a dream. I know better than that. Andy continued to pretend to be asleep as the footsteps began to approach the tent again. My heart pounded more and more. 7 years old, I was practicing Motorfest. I lay back in my sleeping bag.
その作品をこのモーターフェストならではの体験を通じてチェックしてみてください。
Ross, he's on fire, eyes completely shut.
その
Footsteps stopped.
作品をこのモーターフェストならではの
that I didn't even zip up the front of the
What's up,
tent.
guys? It's Supercar Blondie. I'm here to make you discover the rarest and most inconceivable cars on this
For
planet.
at least 2 hours.
What's up, guys? It's Supercar Blondie. I'm here to make you discover the rarest and most inconceivable cars on this planet.
That none of this was real. Imagine that.
What's
2
up?
hours in the dark in a tent outside. Some hours the entire time. Always being silent that long, it gives you a sense of security. Maybe that's why I felt as if I needed to open my eyes then, just to see what was going on. If it was outside still, perhaps the porch light would allow me to see its silhouette somehow. But when I opened my eyes, facing the top of the tent from the inside, I saw a smooth, dark gray rod parallel with the ground, parallel with me. That thing's head had reached inside the tent and was staring down at me. I never expected to get myself this close to it, but now that it was only inches away, I could see the throbbing red veins underneath its gray skin. Yes, red veins. I could see that its rod-like structure was in fact fleshy in texture. It even glistened somewhat, with whatever light from the porch made it through the tent. I tried to search for an eye, but the closest thing to a face I found was a very thin and nearly unnoticeable slit right in the middle of the upper part of the rod. It seemed to vibrate a bit as well. I could not close my eyes anymore. I could not breathe, even. How long had its head been in the tent with us, I wondered? How long had we not been alone? Suddenly, more coyote calls came from within the woods, much closer than they had been before. It must have startled this thing, because it stood stock straight up, bringing with it the tent. Everything inside the tent began to fall out, Andy and I included. We hit the ground at nearly 10 feet high. I wanted to scream when I landed on the tips of my fingers on one of my arms, but I held it back. I'd watched Andy fall with me, and it was the most insane thing. When he hit the ground, he didn't react, didn't stiffen up at all. He stayed loose and limp, playing dead, or just asleep, desperate not to let that thing know he was there. With Andy's tent now looped around its body, stopping just at where its shoulders should have been, the creature walked into the forest and disappeared. When we could no longer hear its footsteps, Andy jumped up, grabbed me by the shoulder, and got us both to run inside. Once we were safely inside the house, I told him we needed to tell his parents. But he panicked and said no. No matter what I said, he refused to tell anyone else. He apparently had plenty of excuses as to why we couldn't do that. They wouldn't believe us. They'd never let you come back to stay the night. My parents would never let us talk again. Things like that. I know now these were probably silly excuses for something so dire and dangerous. But as kids, our friendship seemed to matter more than anything. I was convinced that he was right. If any of our parents knew about this incident, they would never let us hang out again, and I wasn't going to let that happen. We didn't sleep that night. I could tell Andy was tired, but he wanted to stay awake with me after I finally explained my sleeping problem to him. We were exhausted in the morning, and it didn't take long for his mom and dad to notice that I was babying my fingers. I explained that I had tripped up the steps and fallen on them, so they bandaged them up for me and called my parents to come pick me up so they could tend to my injury. As you could probably guess with my parents, they were not at all happy getting their son back injured. Turns out all the fingers in my hand except for my thumb were broken. And despite no matter how much I pleaded, they told me that I would not be allowed over there. That was the first and last time I got to spend the night with Andy. As was now usual with our family, we ended up moving at the end of the school year, but Andy and I made the best of it. We had fun, catching up on the new games together, sharing our theories as to what that creature was. He even told me that my family had been visiting for long. That's why I was so about going to sleep, because that's when they go. Usually it would be at his window. He would ignore it. Eventually, I asked him why he felt brave enough to camp outside with me, knowing that that thing might come by. He explained that having a friend over made him feel brave, made him feel safe, and he figured that if we stayed quiet, the thing would just go away. And I'll give him credit for that. He was right. That creature had only been looking in his window until it heard me moving around in the tent. Andy and I tried to stay in touch after I moved. For the first year, we made regular phone calls to each other. But regular phone calls turned into infrequent phone calls, which then turned into no phone calls. Now, I haven't heard from him in decades. I hope he's doing okay. I hope him and his family are doing too. Anything to get him away. But I do know this. I have a sleeping problem, and after that incident, it had never been worse. Our last sleepover. From Clara Berry, 06. I used to have a friend named Emma. We were close ever since we met in kindergarten, and our relationship lasted all the way into our senior years of high school. Emma was always an odd kid, to put it lightly. I loved her for it, of course, but it was difficult for her to fit in with other children. Ever since I knew her, she had strong anxiety that would cause her to panic over the smallest social nuances. Because of this, she did not understand herself.
Go for Kara. Let's try that again.
It must have been 5th grade when we first had a confrontation. As we approached, she kept what she said was right next to us. This made me upset. She wasn't a baby. She had to stop talking to her imaginary friend. Without flinching, she stated that it was not imaginary. And then she just kept eating. She rarely talked about Tolly's appearance, but from the pieces I stitched together, he was an incredibly tall and thin man. She said he dressed fancy. On one occasion, she said his face did not look like ours, before trying to draw it on a piece of paper. What she drew looked nothing like a human face, but instead that of a stick man. All that was present were 2 thin lines for eyes and a large outline of a half circle for a smile. Tolly stayed the same, more or less, for the next while. That was until 10th grade. As we were leaving the school one day in early September, a group of girls came up to us. One stepped forward before pulling Emma's head by her hair and throwing her to the ground, insulting her about the short haircut looking boyish. They then strutted away, giggling. I remember Emma bleeding a little from her forehead, but she insisted she was all right, so we just walked home. And occasionally,
So